On the 12th day of August, 1570, as dawn heat clung to the stone walls of the Kremlin and the bells of Moscow rang heavy with fatigue, nearly 300 courtiers stood silent. Ivan Vasilievich was awake before sunrise. Russia's armies numbered over 100,000 men that year, yet fear was thicker here than on any battlefield. A single noble was dragged forward, accused of treason. He was not condemned to death. Death was mercy. Ivan had chosen something slower, something meant to echo through generations, and every man in the chamber knew it. Ivan IV had learned early that terror worked best when it was witnessed. Born in 1530, crowned Tsar at 16, he grew up surrounded by betrayal, poisoned alliances, and whispering boyars who saw the throne as a prize to be stolen. By the time Anastasia, his first wife, died in 1560, something inside him fractured permanently. Grief curdled into suspicion. Love rotted into rage. The Tsar became obsessed not merely with obedience, but with total submission of body, blood, and memory. The court that morning watched as guards stripped the condemned prince bare. Noblewomen were present by Ivan's order. Shame was deliberate. Executioners stepped forward, steel gleaming in torchlight, while Ivan leaned close, speaking softly, mocking loyalty that arrived too late. Chroniclers would later record that the Tsar smiled. This was not punishment alone. It was theater. The body was turned into a message, humiliation sharpened into policy. This was the logic behind the Oprichnina, Ivan's private state within the state. Thousands of black-clad riders answered only to him. They carried dog heads and brooms as symbols, to sniff out treason and sweep it away. In practice, they drowned cities, burned villages, and staged executions designed to scar the imagination. Castration, forced naked marches, public degradation, these were not excesses, they were instruments. As blood darkened the palace floor that morning, Ivan understood something few rulers dared articulate. Pain killed the body, shame destroyed the soul. And once a soul was broken in public, fear multiplied faster than armies. This knowledge would not die with Ivan. It would travel across centuries, cultures, and crowns, reshaping how absolute power chose to punish those who dared resist it. The lesson Ivan perfected in Moscow had been learned before, and far beyond Russia's frozen borders.
Absolute power, when stripped of restraint, often turned inward, toward the most private parts of human existence. Long before Ivan watched blood pool on palace stone, rulers elsewhere had already discovered that domination was deepest when it invaded intimacy. Bodies became proclamations, shame became law. In Cairo, believed morality could be enforced by mutilation. Chroniclers recorded marketplaces where merchants accused of selling forbidden stimulants were dragged before crowds and castrated on the spot. The screams were meant to travel farther than any written law. Al-Hakim's obsession went further. Women were forbidden from leaving their homes. Cobblers were ordered to stop making women's shoes. Those who disobeyed were stripped and whipped in public, their humiliation stretched across the streets like a warning banner. For men accused of looking too long, desiring too openly, punishment was surgical and symbolic. A body altered was a soul corrected, or so the caliph believed. The psychology was precise. These punishments erased lineage, honor, and future. Castration did not merely injure, it ended bloodlines, shattering families before witnesses. It told the crowd that rebellion would not be remembered through sons, that defiance would die nameless. Terror became generational. Across the Mediterranean, another ruler refined humiliation into spectacle. Louis XI of France, ruling from 1461, preferred cages to blades. Iron prisons so small men could neither stand nor lie became symbols of his reign. But confinement alone was insufficient. Nobles were displayed naked or half-clothed in public spaces, mocked by those they once ruled. Honor was inverted, power was rewritten. Louis understood what Ivan would later weaponize, that noble status depended on perception. Strip it publicly and the man ceased to exist even while breathing. Forced marriages deepened the wound. A duke's daughter bound to an executioner, compelled to consummate under watch, was not cruelty without purpose, it was political annihilation. By the late medieval world, rulers had reached the same conclusion independently. The battlefield broke armies.
But humiliation, intimate and public, broke civilizations from the inside. By the time these methods reached the eastern frontiers of Europe and the deserts beyond, humiliation had become a language rulers spoke fluently. In Wallachia, in the mid-15th century, the forests themselves seemed to recoil from what they witnessed. Vlad III ruled a small, threatened land pressed between empires, and he believed fear was the only shield strong enough to protect it. His enemies called him the Impaler. His subjects called him Justice. Both were correct. Impalement was slow, deliberate, and carefully staged. Stakes were smoothed so the body would slide without killing too quickly. Victims were raised high, left alive for hours, sometimes days. But for Vlad, certain crimes demanded more than death. Saxon chronicles describe women accused of adultery impaled through their most intimate parts, their naked bodies displayed at city gates. This was not random cruelty. It was a message written into flesh, morality enforced through terror, loyalty carved into memory. For traitors, Vlad escalated further. A young boy accused of dishonoring a noble household was castrated, his severed organs forced into his mouth before impalement. Witnesses recorded that Vlad dined nearby, eating calmly, watching faces pale as men understood the lesson. Disobedience would not merely kill you, it would erase you. Far to the south, in Judea under Roman shadow, Herod the Great ruled with equal paranoia. He built temples and fortresses, but inside his palace, suspicion never slept. According to Josephus, when Herod believed his wife Mariamne had betrayed him, the investigation itself became punishment. Servants were tortured, humiliated, stripped of dignity to extract confessions. When Mariamne was condemned in 29 BCE, her public humiliation preceded her death. Herod wanted the court to hear explicit accusations, to see royal blood reduced to shame. Herod extended this logic to political enemies. Families were punished alongside traitors. Wives and daughters were violated publicly before executions, their suffering transformed into spectacle. The intent was clear. Resistance would poison not only you, but everyone you loved. Across cultures and centuries, a pattern hardened. These rulers did not simply kill opponents, they weaponized intimacy. They understood that the deepest fear was not death, but disgrace, witnessed by all, carried by families long after bodies were gone.
By the 14th century, the machinery of humiliation had reached South Asia, refined within imperial courts, where brilliance and madness walked side by side. In Delhi, under the reign of Muhammad bin Tughlaq, power shifted like sand beneath bare feet. Armies numbered in the tens of thousands, rebellions flared across provinces, and the Sultan responded not with consistency, but with invention. He believed fear had to be renewed constantly, sharpened in unexpected ways. Ibn Battuta, who served at his court, wrote with unease about punishments that unfolded like rituals. Rebels were not executed immediately. First, they were stripped, their clothes burned as crowds watched identity itself disappear in smoke. Then they were mounted backward on donkeys, a position of total disgrace, paraded for hours through Delhi's streets, while citizens were encouraged to spit, laugh, and curse. Only after humiliation was complete did the blade or knife appear. For those accused of intimate betrayal, Tughlaq's punishments crossed into obsession. A governor suspected of disloyalty was publicly castrated before execution, his mutilation serving as proof that no rank, no masculinity, no future was beyond the sultan's reach. In another case, a courtier accused of intimacy within the royal harem was flogged on his most private parts until he collapsed, then executed before the woman he was accused of loving. She was forced to watch, then stoned. Fear was staged to contaminate memory itself. Westward, in Iberia, Peter of Castile ruled through vengeance disguised as justice. When conspirators fell into his hands, death was delayed deliberately. Chroniclers described nobles dragged through Seville in chains, half naked, humiliated before execution. But Peter's cruelty extended to families. Widows were forced into marriages with executioners. Wives and daughters were distributed as spoils, their forced unions a calculated destruction of lineage and honor. In Baghdad, under the Abbasid Caliph al-Mustansir, punishment became religious theater. Those accused of intimate crimes were forced to confess in mosques, recounting their acts in explicit detail before crowds. Stripped and paraded for hours, they arrived at execution already socially dead. Castration, burning, stoning, each act framed as moral purification, yet experienced as absolute terror. Across continents, the same truth emerged. When rulers feared losing control, they reached not for the sword alone, but for shame.
They understood that humiliation could rule where armies could not. By the 16th century, Europe's courts had transformed cruelty into politics as meticulously as a general drew battle lines. Henry VIII of England, though famed for his marriages and his break with Rome,
wielded humiliation like a scalpel. Royal courts were theaters where accusations of adultery became public drama, where bodies, reputations, and marriages were tools of power. Anne Boleyn, accused in 1536, was subjected to public trial detailing her most private actions, a spectacle designed to strip not only her life, but her dignity. Catherine Howard met a similar fate in 1542. The court's gaze became a weapon, and every whisper of scandal ensured obedience through fear. Forced marriages became instruments of control and degradation. When noble women displeased Henry, their families suffered through humiliation engineered with precision. A noble daughter might be compelled to marry a man of low birth, her body and honor leveraged to produce loyalty, to broadcast submission, to demonstrate the king's unassailable power. In these acts, the private became public, the intimate transformed into policy, a pattern repeated from Moscow to Delhi. Louis XI of France, remembered as the universal spider, extended these methods in ways that entwined subtlety and cruelty. Cages so small prisoners could not lie down were placed in public squares, forcing spectators to witness the distortion of human form. Forced nudity, mockery, prolonged exposure, all these were innovations of humiliation, designed not just to punish, but to terrorize communities. Even death alone was insufficient. Humiliation ensured obedience long after life ended, etching submission into memory itself. Vlad the Impaler, Herod the Great, and Peter of Castile understood similar truths. Their punishments combined blood and shame, often in public displays of intimate violence. By striking at the most personal vulnerabilities, they created a terror that armies could never replicate. Castration, public nudity, forced marriages, impalement, all became instruments of psychological domination. The ruler who controlled fear controlled hearts, minds, and generations. Across history, these acts shared a terrifying symmetry. Russia, France, Judea, Wallachia, England, Delhi, Baghdad, different lands, different eras, yet the same calculus of cruelty prevailed: control the body, shatter dignity, and command obedience.
The rulers did not merely kill enemies, they unmade them, erased identity, redefined humanity, and used the spectacle to send messages far beyond the victims themselves. These stories remind us that the essence of power lies not only in conquest or force, but in the mastery of fear. The human body, intimate and vulnerable, became the arena where dominance was asserted, and history's most notorious rulers proved that terror, when applied with imagination, was immortal. By the late 16th century, a pattern was unmistakable. Across continents and centuries, rulers who sought absolute control had discovered the same grim formula. Power was most absolute when exercised not only over life and death, but over the body, the family, and the private self. Ivan IV had perfected this in Moscow. Henry VIII had wielded it in London. Louis XI in Paris.